And welcome to our 25th anniversary special of the greatest show on turf. With me, our senior producer, Andy Mohler, Mike Bush, the sports director and the voice of the Rams in that magical 1999 season. We got a lot to talk about. I guess we should start with the hiring of Mike Martz because we all love Dick Vermeil. It wasn't going his way. John Shaw stepped in and said, get rid of Jerry Rome and a few others. Let's bring in this young buck from Washington.
And what we knew about Mike Martz when he came in here is he was a disciple of Don Coryell, who St. Louis fans knew very well because he was the architect of the Cardiac Cardinals and at the time was coaching the San Diego Chargers and Dan Fouts and that group. So we knew he knew offense. The other thing I remember about Mike Martz was being up at training camp, and he rode Kurt Warner so hard up in Macomb. I thought, this guy is never going to make the team. I mean, he is riding him after every single play. He was so hard on Kurt Warner at Macomb.
And I do remember that when Frank came back from training camp in August, Kurt's going to make the team. Kurt's going to make the team. Like, what?
What?
Yeah. And the interesting thing is, Kurt would do the same things wrong that Trent Green would do, but Martz would never jump on Trent Green because he was the starter.
Right.
And Warner's thinking, wait a minute, he did the same thing I did.
Exactly.
All right, well, let's talk about Trent Green and bringing him in. I got a great story there. So they give him $16 million from Washington. They're about to have the press conference. They're upstairs, second floor of Rams Park. Everybody's downstairs at the media room. And Jim Steiner, the agent, says, okay, Coach Vermeil, you have to announce that Trent Green is going to be your starting quarterback. And he still had Tony Banks on the roster, and he loved Tony Banks. He was the only person that did love Tony Banks. And Vermeil was adamant, I'm not going to go down. You can't tell me. You're an agent. You can't tell me who the starting quarterback is. And then basically Jim said, okay, no press conference, this thing's off. And then John Shaw finally had to say, Dick, you have to say Trent Green's the starting quarterback.
But that just shows you what Dick Vermeil was like, because Dick was so loyal to the players that he knew, so loyal to a fault. It was, I mean, he was not going to diss Tony Banks in any way, shape, or form, even though he knew who was going to be the starting quarterback for that kind of money.
And the whole dynamic, Vermeil was a curiosity after being out of football for 15 years before he came back in, and things weren't going, very well. The honeymoon was kind of over.
Yeah, and people forget that Trent really set the tone for the greatest show on turf because he must have completed like 88% of his passes before he got hit by Rodney Harrison.
Yes, and if you remember after that hit, I remember Isaac Bruce just was slamming the turf. Everybody was so upset after he went down because you thought, okay, there goes the Rams season. I remember having dinner, because I was in the booth when this happened, in the radio booth, and I had dinner with some friends after the game, and I said, that's it, they're done.
Yeah.
They've got no chance this year. And they were coming off a terrible year, and even though they went out and got Marshall Faulk, and now they have Trent Green. When Green went down, well, who's the backup? Are they going to bring in Jeff Hostetler? I mean, what are they going to do here?
And famously, about probably 14 hours after that dinner, Vermeil at Rams Park said, we will rally around Kurt Warner.
He did
with
it
tears.
just like that.
In typical emotional fashion,
You mentioned Faulk. I guess, you couldn't write a history about it without him. And what a steal. Is it just a couple of picks?
It was a second-round pick and a fifth-round pick, I believe. And
can you imagine that?
Certainly not. You look back on that, and we got away with robbery, it seems.
Oh, there's no question. And I think you did an interview with Mike Martz not too long ago, talking about who was the smartest football player he ever saw, and it was Marshall Faulk.
Yeah. So we had all this concern about this fella named Warner, and in that Baltimore game, he threw 3 touchdown passes. A few weeks later, he had that perfect passing rating against Cincinnati, and we were off.
And if you watched him, and it's the one thing, I don't know, you just didn't notice it at training camp, his release was so quick, he made decisions so quickly, which is not what you'd expect for someone with his lack of experience.
And it was all thought to be, his time in the Arena League was a novelty, right? But it turned out that was the best thing that he could have done because that's where he learned. You got to make quick decisions. You got to think on your feet.
And don't forget, they not only went and got Marshall Faulk, they already had Isaac Bruce, but they drafted Torrey Holt, who was an immediate star. And
they acquired Adam Timmerman, who was actually the very first move in that offseason to get a guy from Green Bay, a Super Bowl champion, to come here. They gave him a lot of money, too. And the thing about Warner is this, I know you can't make a case for him being one of the 5 greatest quarterbacks of all time because he just didn't have longevity.
Right.
But my contention is, at his best, no one was better. It was a short window, but who was more accurate? Maybe Joe Montana? I don't even know that.
No, and who made decisions
Yeah.
quicker? I mean, it didn't matter. Remember how many times they had an empty backfield? He had nobody with him, and quick, boom, boom, boom. He found somebody. And those people that were getting open would make plays after they caught the ball.
And all of a sudden, our town, which was never considered a great football town, we drew, I think the stat was attendance of above 60,000 for every game of that season. And as Jim Thomas said on TV the other day, that the Vikings game, the first playoff game ever in St. Louis, was the loudest he's ever heard any football game.
Well, and there have been some exciting teams since then in the NFL, but has there ever been a more exciting team than that greatest show on turf ever in NFL history?
That was probably the first of what you might consider an offense of the present day.
Right.
And Kurt, famously, he told you just recently or whatever that he'd be happy to put his guys up against any offense
In
that's
their
going
prime,
on now.
I mean, they'd be fantastic now.
Yeah, just think Hall of Famers on that offense. Bruce is in, Pace is in, Warner's in, Falk's in.
Holt should be
could
in.
be in, yeah. Vermeil is in, and
Yeah.
then, yeah, it's amazing. So that's why I think it's hurt Torrey, by the way, because, hey, they only won one Super Bowl. How can you put the whole team in? You know, with the Steelers, they had 4 Super Bowls. So.
And they started raising their own expectations. I remember, I think they won their first 6 games that
Yes.
year, and they lost their first game to Tennessee. I remember being in the tunnel in Tennessee after that game. You would have thought that they were 1-6, not 6-1, because they were really upset about it, because all of a sudden they had these expectations that they were not going to lose.
Today in St. Louis is weather plus traffic.
Waking up with chilly air this morning, so a weather impact alert.
3 things piling on which could affect your morning commute.
Anthony Slaughter and Paul Cook have you covered. Out the door, on the roads.
The numbers do not lie. It is very cold this morning.
A tumultuous commute. That's what you're dealing with.
I'll tell you what weather to expect and when it will arrive.
And I'll show you how that will impact your drive.
Get your weather plus traffic on Today in St. Louis to start your day safe and prepared.
Now, I'm not sure of this, but I know Chris Berman said, quote, forget Ringling Brothers, the Rams are the greatest show on earth. But I wonder who gave them the official title of greatest show on turf.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, but
Brilliant
it's stuck.
description. Yeah.
It's stuck.
Yeah, and it's amazing too because no matter where you go, and it seems like it pops up. Nobody's talking about teams from 25 years ago like they talk about the greatest show on turf.
Yeah.
I mean, anytime you see this high-flying offense, oh, that reminds you of the greatest show on turf.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it was very exciting to watch, and every game inside the dome was electric. One of the things, in a personal note, if you remember, because of the year that they had previous to this, every single one of their games was at noon. Their East Coast games were at noon. I'm talking about Central Time. Their East Coast games were at noon. Every game here was at noon. They were not the primetime players at all. We did, obviously, when they went to the West Coast, they were at 3. But we did, I had to come back and host Sports Plus every night after a game, and we would take the team playing. I'd come here. So I was doing the games. That would not have been possible in any other circumstance. If it was a Thursday night game, if they had Monday night games, none of that happened that season. It was all Sundays at noon.
All right, let's talk about some of the other major players. Isaac Bruce, who is in the Hall of Fame, and he had so many stories that season. You know, remember that when he was going to Mizzou to watch a basketball game and his car flipped over and he had the presence of mind to yell, Jesus, Jesus, while the car was turning. And then, of course, the most famous story, Vikings game, right before the game, he allegedly tears his hamstring and he goes into the locker room, gets out his phone, and calls his sister. They pray together, first play of the game, touchdown.
And does anything say Mike Martz any more than that first play coming right out of the gate, throwing it downfield and going 77 yards for a touchdown?
No, that was Mike Martz at his best.
Then Torrey Holt, who began his career with, we had that stretch where he had 7 consecutive 1,300-yard receiving yard seasons. He was every bit as good as Isaac.
He really was. But then they were together, and they also had Oz Hakim, who was extremely fast and would make a great play here and there.
Great
and
kick returner.
And Ricky Prohl, who was Mr.
Caught
Hands.
nearly 500 balls.
Right. Although that year he didn't catch a touchdown pass until that huge playoff touchdown pass against Tampa Bay.
And then the other Hall of Famer would be Orlando Pace, who is,
Right.
you know, that's what an unbelievable comfort level for an offensive coordinator and a quarterback knowing, hey, you do not have to worry about his blind
Right.
side because he is there. And he's
And the coach of that offensive line?
the great Jim
Jim
Hannafin.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he had those guys playing top of the game, and he was one of the best offensive line coaches in the history of the game.
The thing about Pace is I don't think we ever realized how good an athlete he was because he's so massive at 6'6", 330 pounds, yet like I was like a superstar high school basketball player. He moved like a guy that was 5'11", 180, and he just had this great size.
Really did.
And you know, one thing, in going back through the archives and trying to find, you know, clips. I tried to save clips every week of stuff that was going on with individual players. I had very little on Orlando Pace because they didn't ISO on him very much because there was no matchup.
There was
with
nothing
him.
happening.
Yeah.
There was-
And there's all these little side stories with Pace, too. Remember how he was a big holdout? And
Yeah.
he finally ended up signing like the last preseason game. And Vermeil couldn't hold back. He says, well, let me tell you something. That agent didn't do him any favors. And then he got him and started him for like 10 straight years. Yeah. Oh, the other thing about Pace, which I thought was really smart by him, is he'd miss training camp every year. He was a holdout. He was too smart. He had gone to Macomb and all those torture practices, and there was no way. And finally, about a week before the season, he would sign that contract and be fresh.
And you remember how much the players hated those Macomb practices.
so did we.
So did we under Coach Vermeil, because Vermeil was very old school.
And he described it perfectly. He goes, he needed to change the culture of the team, and you don't change the culture of the team by taking him down to Florida and having him drink milkshakes.
Yeah, good point. All right, then there was the defensive side of the ball, and they had some good players, especially on the ends when you had Kevin Carter here and Grant Wistrom there, two high energy, real high character guys too. You got to know them.
Yeah, and I think they finished 6th in the league in defense that year, which I think was unexpected. I don't think people thought they were going to be that good. London Fletcher was another great player. They had great defensive back. I mean, I think one of the maybe the unsung heroes of that whole group was the defense.
Yeah.
Remember the play Mike Jones made?
Don't have to go any further. And the Rams had co-defensive coordinators that year. John Bunting and Peter Junta, right?
I'm glad you brought up London Fletcher, too, who may end up in the Pro Football Hall of Fame because he had that streak of 100 tackle seasons. But that was a great story with the Rams because Charlie Army, their really smart general manager, knew all about him. He went to that John Carroll University, I think. And he was so in love with him, but so worried that somebody else was going to take him, he did not even tell his scouts, his own scouts, about him because he knows scouts just gab, gab, gab. So as soon as that draft ended, first phone call, they signed him.
And you remember the knock against him was his size, because for a linebacker, he was very small, but he was so lightning fast. And I don't know how many tackles he ended up with in his career, but it's among the leaders of all time.
Yeah, and the thing about it is they had to make a decision at the end whether they keep Fletcher or they keep Leonard Little, and they ended up keeping Leonard Little because they paid him the $10 million instead of Fletcher because edge rushers are more valuable. But in the end,
that was a mistake.
Yeah, big mistake.
We're starting with breaking news this morning.
And right now, 5 on Your Side is live on the scene.
Of course, a parent's worst nightmare.
Your kids can get a hold of this even at gas stations.
If you are watching us from this area, then you need to seek shelter right now.
These accidents can be contagious, 7 miles an hour on the bridge, so we need to talk about solutions.
Could cause some hiccups in your morning commute, but don't worry, we do have you covered this morning.
Reporting live here in Brentwood.
We're live in Monroe County.
Live in the Delmar Loop. Live in North St. Louis.
Today in St. Louis is the best way to start your day.
Let's get ready to rumble! Super Bowl Sunday. The countdown is on. And when you want the latest from Atlanta, News Channel 5 takes you there.
Some well-known St. Louisans roll into Atlanta.
Now, News Channel 5 is proud to welcome Rams quarterback Trent Green. to our team of people you know, giving you an insider perspective on the players, the coaches, on and off the field. We gotta go to work! When you want the latest on your hometown team, turn to News Channel 5, where the news comes first.
Let's get back to Super Bowl week and how we remember the travel and everything leading up to it. We were all in Atlanta there for a week.
Yeah, so one of the things that we did here at Channel 5 is we rented out a space in the Rams Hotel right in the lobby. And so we had this advantage that we were there with the team, and anytime someone came in while we were on the air, we tried to grab them for interviews. It was really a great situation for us, but we were so excited. We could not believe that this team that had won 4 games the year before, and remember, we had those many, many years with the St. Louis football Cardinals, who never sniffed a Super Bowl, let alone making the playoffs.
Win, yeah.
Right, a playoff win. So, I mean, I just kept thinking to myself, oh my God, I cannot believe we're covering the Super Bowl and that this team is in it. And I think the way they struggled against Tampa Bay to win it, to make it to the Super Bowl, but I think we all thought, well, they've got a chance to win the Super Bowl.
And it was weird because it was right after that game, we're on a flight to Atlanta the next morning. It was one of those rare Super Bowls where you didn't get 2 weeks of hype.
Both times the Rams went to the Super Bowl, there was only 1 week between the conference championship and the Super Bowl.
Right.
2 years later, it was because of 9/11. But I think, didn't they try some new scheduling thing or whatever that particular year in Atlanta?
Yeah, I think the Pro Bowl was always kind of in the way, and they were discussing how to make that more pertinent. And I don't know, they decided not to have 2 weeks in between. But
And we flew to what we thought would be balmy Atlanta, and it turned into an ice storm.
did you get caught in the ice storm? Because a lot of people who went down there would go on public transportation to get to places, and one of those buses or trams or something got stuck in the ice, and it was like the people were on it for like hours.
Well, as a matter of fact, the day before the game, I went with like our photographers that were going to be staffed for after the game, and a couple of our bosses, and we took the tram to the Georgia Dome for a site survey, so we would know where our station was after the game was over, so we could run out there and get on live very quickly. And as we're taking the tram down there, I'm looking out on the highway was pretty vacant, but every so often, car turned over, car slid into it, or
well,
whatever.
they're not used to it.
Oh no, absolutely.
Here's
not.
another story. This is a Stan Kroenke story because we were in the team hotel. I get off the air one night at 10:30 or whatever we were doing, and I had a pretty good relationship with Stan, who was then the minority owner of the Rams.
He wasn't evil at the time.
Yeah, he wasn't evil at the time, and he couldn't have moved the team because Georgia loves St. Louis, Georgia Frontier. So he calls me over and he says, hey, Mike, tomorrow we're going to fly up to see, I think Josh was playing
that's right.
college basketball then. We're going to go up to see him, and then we're going to come right back down. Would you like to go with us? And I thought, well, that would be cool. I've never been on a private plane before. But of course I couldn't go because I was working for Channel 5.
You mentioned that hotel scene where, boy, we really planned ahead. It was Tony Villasana, who
And
just
Chuck Malden.
Operation Chuck Malden. It was
Malden,
great.
yeah.
And that area was just hopping.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd look one way, there'd be Ron Jaworski. You'd look one way, there'd be Kevin Green. Hey, there's Lynn Swann. And just all these Hall of Famers just in and out of the hotel.
Yeah, it was really a great situation for us to be in, and we were in that situation again 2 years later when they went to New Orleans in the Super Bowl.
And not to mention that, but almost every politician with any clout at all in Missouri was there in that lobby. I can't remember how many we talked to, but they all wanted to be where the action was.
So here's a story on the day of the game. So I'm in the booth, the radio booth. We had like a 4 or 5 hour pregame show on the radio, and we had it all planned out. It was all lined up. And Rick Smith, remember Rick Smith, who was the PR guy for the Rams? He says, John Ashcroft is here, and I need you to get him on the air for the pregame show. Well, everything had already been done. So I went to the producer. I said, can we fit John Ashcroft? And he said, no, we can't. But I didn't want to upset John Ashcroft, and I didn't want to upset Rick. So I took a tape recorder with no tape outside, and I went out into the hallway, and I did an interview with John Ashcroft that never saw the light of day. And what I remember about that interview is that John Ashcroft, this politician who was very famous in Missouri, who eventually became one of the most powerful people in the United States as the Attorney General, had ram's horns on his cheeks. And I couldn't get over this, how this man was.
Looked like Putty on Seinfeld.
Yeah, it just, exactly.
Root for the team.
And it just didn't compute.
And in terms of the game itself, I could remember being in that end zone. I guess I was with Tony Chambers, our photographer, and just seeing Bruce like coming at you with the ball. It was just unbelievable. And then they get it back, and Steve McNair won't be stopped.
Oh, my God.
And then the famous thing from NFL films, when Kevin Carter wants to come out of the game, it's the Super Bowl. You don't kill him out of the game like 30 seconds left. Yeah.
Right.
What a moment for Mike Jones.
And if Mike Jones doesn't make the tackle, who knows if we're even talking about this?
Right, well, probably have overtime, and then it's anybody.
Then you never know, because the Titans had gotten a little bit of momentum on that drive, and it didn't look like they could be stopped until Mike Jones made that tackle on Dyson.
That was one of the beauties of that season. We, at the time, the Rams were still fairly new, and so we not only would we send a reporter on the road, and ultimately you as the play-by-play broadcaster, we would send photographers on the road to shoot the games out there.
In each end zone.
For the Super Bowl, we had 2 in one end zone and a third in the opposite end zone.
Yeah.
It was so great.
It was great, and I have to tell you, and this still is in my mind. It'll come back in a rush every Super Bowl season. Our radio booth was on the 50-yard line in Atlanta. I'm looking over. I've got a better sight line than Al Michaels. I mean, I did not understand how this was possible. It was so great, and I just kept pinching myself. I cannot believe I'm here at the Super Bowl, and I'm on the radio calling the Rams' victory. And it was, even to this day, it's one of the highlights of my life.
Weather impacts everyone.
You need to know when weather is threatening, but also when it's just inconvenient.
We'll alert you when problematic or severe weather will be in your area.
Tell you exactly how those storms will impact you and your day.
And what you need to know to keep you and your family safe.
Keep your eye out for our weather impact alert days. Those are the days shown in red on our 7-day forecast.
We'll be tracking all of these storms on your devices until they're no longer your problem.
That's how 5 on Your Side is keeping you safe and prepared.
After the 1999 season and the Super Bowl victory, the Rams had another really good year. Warner got hurt, although Trent Green came in and played really well. And then the season after that, they go back to the Super Bowl. We're all in New Orleans, and it was just, we thought it's going to be 2 wins in a row. And, I wonder.
Nobody knew who Tom Brady was until that Super Bowl.
And sometimes I wonder if you would have won that Super Bowl, A, could you have ever fired Mike Martz? And B, would the team still be here? I don't know. I mean, it's like what Martz said. As soon as Kroenke moved the team to L.A., he was worth $1 billion more. Maybe it all would have happened, but sometimes I think about that.
But we all felt when Kroenke bought the Rams, he's a Missouri guy.
Yeah.
I mean, his middle name is Enos, after Enos Slaughter, the great Cardinal outfielder. We thought, okay, we're good. I mean, he's not going to move the team. He has no connection to L.A., which wasn't true, but that's what we thought. So we're good in St. Louis, but obviously not.
Don't you think, too, that if he would have just come out, and we wouldn't have liked it, wouldn't have liked it, but would he be that despised if he would have just come and said, look, I really have loved my time here, but I can make this $1 billion and build the most magnificent stadium in the NFL. I'm going to go, but I just want to thank you for everything, and I hope the NFL can reward St. Louis. If he would have just done that instead of all the lying and the backdoor stuff he did, which ended up costing him $800 million.
And it wasn't just him, it was his cronies lying to us, too.
Kevin Demoff and the rest of the owners.
Exactly.
There was a complete absence of class in the whole you know, in the whole process, and we're kind of left, as you have put it, with the, you know, the ownership team from hell.
We won a lottery in hell,
And the truth is, the chances of us getting another football team are slim to none.
Yeah, not when the NFL has written a check to $800 million. You think they would say, yeah, let's go back to that town.
Yeah, which is too bad, because I think it doesn't give enough credit to the fans here. I think we've seen just with the St. Louis Battlehawks.
It's amazing.
It's amazing, because I think people underestimate what great sports fans there are in the St. Louis area and in this region in general. You see it every night at Cardinal games. We've seen it for many, many years at Blues games.
We break records for golf tournaments,
Right.
for NASCAR events,
Right.
and IndyCar races.
I mean, this is a thirsty bunch of fans, and you know, if you give an effort, I mean, for many, many years, the Blues never won a Stanley Cup till 2019, and yet they had tremendous amount of support. And the Cardinals' TV ratings are always the best until the last year or two of any major league team. So I just don't think St. Louis and our region gets enough credit for the kind of fans we are. And if we got another football team, I think it would be extremely well supported, as well as anywhere in the country.
And don't you feel that, of course, you know, when we're talking about a lack of class, when Stan just excoriated St. Louis on the way out, so, oh, well, it's just a baseball town. That felt like a gut punch.
Yeah.
But yet, you know, we got up off the deck and we have supported every
we're doing
event
pretty well with
ever
soccer,
since
aren't we?
then.
Yeah,
Yes, I think
exactly.
So, all right, I'm glad we had a chance to get together on the 25th anniversary special of the St. Louis Rams winning the Super Bowl. Senior producer Andy Mohler, former sports director Mike Bush. I'm Frank Cusumano.